So the symptoms exhibited after this is what is called a stroke. Hello, welcome to my stroke story. And if you're just meeting me for the first time, my name is Ada Ame and I am a stroke survivor. On today's video, we'll be talking about the symptoms of stroke. I just realized that a lot of people are not even aware of the symptoms of stroke, even people that have had stroke before. Like, are you serious? Like, how don't you know the symptoms of stroke? And it is said that when you know the symptoms of stroke, you'll be able to identify it. And when you're able to identify that you or someone around you is having a stroke, you'll be able to take them to the hospital for treatment. And you know how it is now. The earlier you start your treatment, the better your chances of survival, and the less brain cells that are lost, which means that the more likely you won't be permanently disabled. When you're talking about stroke, time is of the essence. Stroke is time. So that being said, the earlier you're able to identify these symptoms, the earlier you know these symptoms, you should be able to identify when you or someone around you is having a stroke. And when you're able to identify, you can get these people to get treatment ASAP as soon as possible. And once they get this treatment as soon as possible, it reduces their chances of dying and it also reduces their chances of disability. There's this acronym called Be Fast. It is used in the stroke world to identify when someone is having a stroke. As when someone exhibits two or more symptoms, it is said that okay, that person may be having a stroke, so it is time to rush that person to the hospital. So they may be able to ascertain if the person is having a stroke or not. And be fast. The B stands for balance and coordination. The person leaning on one side of the person's body so much. Is the person unable to walk? The E stands for eyes. Is the person having visual problems? That is the person having double vision? Is the person's vision blurry? Is the person unable to see clearly? F stands for face. Is the person's face drooping? Now, this thing about face drooping, you may not be able to identify it until the person is smiling. So once you want to know if the person is having a droopy face, just tell the person to smile. And when the person smiles, you now realize that one side of the person's face is it just looks awkward. A stands for arm weakness. Maybe the person is unable to use his or her arms. Also have S. The S stands for speech. Is the person's speech slow? The person may be talking and you may not be able to understand what the person is saying. T stands for time. So once you're able to identify those symptoms in that person, or you may not necessarily identify all, but once you're able to identify most of those symptoms, it means that it is time to go to the doctor. I know here in Nigeria we don't have an emergency number, but it is time to go to the hospital. You need to go to the hospital ASAP. Remember what I said, time is of the essence. So when you go there, there's this scan that is done and it is able to ascertain where and when this happened and what type of stroke the person is having, because all these are very essential in the treatment. Remember, a hemorrhagic stroke and an ischemic stroke, their treatments are slightly different. With that being said, there are other symptoms of stroke, that vertigo, spinning sensation. Someone like me, when I was having mine, I would never ever forget. I was seated. Oh no. I was walking and I realized that I was wearing heels and I realized that I was unable to keep balancing. I'm like, okay, I told my friend, I'm like, okay, let me sit. And when I sat, I had this very intense headache. I think that was the worst headache of my life. And when I had that headache, I told him, I was like, I'm having a headache. And he's like, no, don't worry, you go home. When you rest, you'll be fine. And I was like, in my mind, I knew that headache was, something was wrong. And I told him, and I said, something is off. And before I knew it, I became unconscious. Lost a lot of brain cells because I was unable to identify. And right now, if I were to tell my younger self, I would have told my younger self to be educated on issues like this, because if I was educated, I wouldn't have lost a lot of brain cells and it wouldn't have affected my body. Like I said, I suffered hemiplegia, that means I was paralyzed on one side, and it also affected my speech, my sight, my vision, my hearing. I was also affected my ability to walk. And that is why I am educating you on these symptoms, because I know and I believe that if you're educated on these symptoms, it's going to improve someone else's quality of life, because once that person is able to identify, once you or that person is able to identify that he or she is having a stroke, that person will rush for medical treatment and the person won't lose as much brain cells as he or she would have lost. If you remember earlier when I said that about 50 million people suffer strokes annually worldwide, and I said that 5 million of them die, 5 million of them are left with little or no form of disability, and the remaining 5 million of them are left chronically disabled. Now, the difference between all these categories is that one party was able to get treatment as soon as possible, because you can never ever compare a person who had a stroke and within few hours that person was able to go to the hospital and the person started treatment, and someone who realized that the person was having a stroke later on. Their symptoms can never ever ever be the same. The later would always be more physically challenged. So this is why stroke awareness is very important.